cup of coffee comes from our beloved Greenjay. Greenjay writes, I was 4 or 5 years old when I had the following experience. As I recall, I woke up one night and in the room was a wooden toy cabinet. I saw that the doors of the cabinet were wide open and it was full of apples, but protruding from the middle of these apples and waving at me was an arm. Frightened half to death by this sight, I hid under my covers, not daring to look again, and I suppose eventually fell back to sleep. As I grew up, I put this down to being a simple childhood nightmare, but apart from one similar experience a few years later, where I woke to find the figure of a monk in my room, this was unlike any regular dream. It was so real, and I had such a fear and deep dislike of the toy cabinet thereafter. I remember it being kept inside a large built-in wardrobe in the bedroom. I would always have to keep it hidden behind the doors because it really gave me the creeps for years to come. Around 40 years later, after I'd seen the movie Enter the Void, I became interested in DMT, which is dimethyltryptamine. You might know this powerful psychedelic as the spirit molecule. It's found in nature in many plants and is produced naturally in the human brain. One day the opportunity arose for me to try DMT for myself. At high doses, DMT is known to induce a near-death type experience, and indeed this is what happened to me. I had like a life review where I was taken back and shown different points in my life. At one point, I was taken out of body to my home and could see my wife sitting in the dining room. It was so real. I was sure if I spoke, she would hear me. I chose not to try because I didn't want to frighten her. I was taken and shown other dimensions and taken back seemingly through time. At one point, I found myself looking at myself as a child in the room where I'd had that experience. Again, this seemed so real, like I was in the room. I saw the child was sitting up in bed and seemed to be looking back at me with a frightened expression. I'm thinking, can I see myself? How could that be? It's impossible. I raised my arm to wave at my child self, so convinced was I that he could see me. As I waved, the child me dove under the covers to hide. It was then I realized that it was my own arm I'd seen as a child waving at me. When I looked around, whatever space I was in was no longer in the old bedroom and seemed to be surrounded by these bright green bubbles, the apples. Many more weird and wonderful things happened during this experience, but this part was the most memorable and poignant bit. Though I appreciate how anyone might dismiss this as being a dream and a drug-induced hallucination, it left me in little doubt that we don't need our bodies to exist, and without them, maybe we can travel to any time or place we choose. Greenjay, that was just fascinating. What an experience. And that very much went in with the episode that Mr. Ballin had talked about that I alluded to in the previous video. And I do want to discuss this in a day or so while it's still fresh on my mind. We have all these weird alternate realities that we have no clue about. In one of the Men in Black movies, I can't remember if it was the second one or third one, there was a character and he was able to go between different dimensions. And that, yeah, that's a very trippy thing there, Greenjay. It was one of those, I have difficulties dealing with one reality. And especially since I think we've all been shifted to a different reality, and I don't know that any of us signed up for the one that we're in right now. So, interesting things. You know, I'm sure that the DMT that you had researched as far as the safety and different things like that, I'm sure you were in a proper environment. I do think that it is the proper thing that medical science do be able to, experiment with these things, because for a long time they just stopped everything cold. And experiences like this do need to be studied. It would be an interesting thing to find out as far as different areas of your brain, as they highlighted. We do not have the medical equipment to measure a spiritual experience. That doesn't mean that they're ever to be discounted. You know, how are you going to measure realm of spirit with fourth dimensional equipment? And a lot of them, unless you get into like NASA and stuff like that, they're not going to recognize that time-space continuum, which is the fourth dimension. So many questions this brings. I have lots of questions about it. I would like to, for you to share. One, I'd like for you to share the experience about having the specter of the monk in your room. That would be cool to hear. Some of the other things that you experienced while you were on the DMT, love to hear those. And I thank you so very much. If you've got paranormal, supernatural, UFO, alien, big feet, and if you've got just specifically big feet, that's not my problem. But if you've seen a big feet, if you've seen a Bigfoot, anything like that, that's in that realm, yeah, send me an email at cupofcoffeewithscream@gmail.com. Love to hear those. If you just need someone to share whatever with, send me an email. You all have a beautiful, blessed day.